Right, the Roadshow, the Noel Edmonds Roadshow. Responsible for the death of a man.
I'm surprised Noel Edmonds didn't turn up in John Wick.
That would have been amazing.
Gorgeous face.
Oh, yeah. Gorgeous face.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at OffRadarPodcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt.
All right. Hey guys, and welcome back to Off Radar Series 3. My name is James Smith. I am joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
I thought that was a perfectly normal hello.
It's just the way he looked up. Just like the way Smith looked up.
And
Nige.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige. And the reason we're giggling so much is because we're all sat in the same room again for only the second time since the Pando. So
the Australian Pando.
Pando. And we have just watched a film together, the three of us. In fact, you know what it is because you've clicked on it already. It's called John Wick, 2014. And yeah, so we've gone downstairs to Eatock's private little cinema.
The building I live in has a private cinema. Don't make it sound like it's my own personal private cinema.
His own private dungeon.
We've watched John Wick, and we are now going to give our reviews. And what we also do, if you've not listened to us before, is we rate it out of 10 at the end and give our rating. I think maybe before we get into John Wick, it might be wise to just do a little bit of a Keanu Reeves chat, because
yeah, sure.
Keanu is plastered all over this film. It's probably one of his biggest films since, I don't know, probably since The Matrix, really. It's like, you know, he did, I mean, personally growing up, you know, Bill and Ted, Point Break, and then Speed was like the massive blockbuster hit that kind of almost came out of nowhere for him. Massive at the blockbusters, and then obviously the
massive at blockbusters. I'll rent Speed, please.
Blockbuster video, massive at the blockbuster videos.
And then obviously Matrix, which obviously we've spoke about in our top 5 noughties episode, which was one of my favourite films of the noughties.
Just quickly, anybody seen the new Matrix? I've heard it's very bad.
No. Yeah, I've seen it.
And have you? Nige?
When we do this on the pod?
You can do a one-line review. Go on.
One-line review.
Go, Nige, go. Oh, dear.
Okay.
That's enough of a review for us.
I was really looking forward to that, but I've heard bad things.
My friend's like a massive Matrix. Like, he just loves those movies. He went to see it, and I was like, what was it like? And he just replied with, like, an emoji of someone throwing up. I was like,
I didn't like either of the sequels all that much. No. I obviously love the original, but this is... It was nice to see Carrie-Anne Moss again. That's probably the only thing I can say about it. The rest of it...
I loved Carrie-Anne Moss in... We're going on a complete tangent here. In the Jessica Jones Netflix series, Carrie-Anne Moss was great.
Yeah,
in those Marvel shows,
she
was really fucking good in those shows. But yeah, Keanu's films.
One of the Keanu's films that we've not mentioned is Devil's Advocate with him and Pacino.
I love that.
Which is one of those that kind of, I think it's like disappeared from most people's memories of ever existing. But it's one of, I remember my brother having it on like VHS and just being like, oh, what's this? Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. And it's just... If you've not seen it, I highly recommend going back and checking it out.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that in years, and it's weird with him because he's done such a weird kind of range of films.
He's done a wide array of...
It's like, because after Speed, it was almost like set for him to become an action star, you know, especially at that time in the 90s. But it didn't really kind of pan out like that. You know, he did films like Constantine and The Day the Earth Stood Still. And, you know, he did a lot of kind of average films. And then...
Johnny Mnemonic?
That's the 90s, wasn't it? Like early 90s, Johnny Mnemonic?
A bit earlier. And like The Gift and... all sorts of just a very sort of bland run of films where if you've seen it or if you've not, it probably doesn't make that much difference. So,
like, I think a lot has been written about him as a person in Hollywood. Not a lot. I didn't know a lot about this, but I take it you guys knew this. But apparently he's meant to be a very down-to-earth, nice guy, donates money to charity. There's various YouTube videos of him like riding a train and giving up his seat for people.
There's that famous. He became like one of the early memes, didn't he? Of him on a bench eating a sandwich, right. And it became like this huge thing of like Keanu. Just I don't know if it was like, is Keanu sad or something? It was just, oh, it's Keanu Reeves. You're not going to see George Clooney sitting on a park bench eating a sandwich, if you know what I mean. I'm sure he's done that in his life. But with Keanu, it just made him even more down to earth. It's like, oh, you could be walking through the park and see Keanu Reeves. You're not really going to see Tom Cruise having that. I'm just going to go for a walk in Brooklyn, because you can't. And neither can Keanu, in fairness. But I think, like you say, just very down to earth, very, very humble dude.
Yeah, and I think as well there's a story about when he worked on the Matrix films where he ended up, I can't remember exactly what happened, but he gave a portion of his salary towards all the stunt people that worked on the film. Oh, wow. And like I think they bought like motorbikes and all sorts of stuff happened. Just, there's, as you say, there's so many stories where he comes across as a really nice guy, and a lot of things he says kind of point towards the fact that if you're just a single guy and you're just living your life, that's okay. You don't have to be this like publicity whore, I suppose, which a lot of Hollywood actors feel like they need to be.
That's right. And apparently, I don't know if this is true because there's been a couple of versions of this story, but there was a story with the new Matrix film that he gave all of the kind of earnings to cancer research after the film. It seems like something he'd do, but there's also been kind of counter stories saying that's not true. So yeah, we can't necessarily verify that.
I think another thing that sums him up is, you know, you talk about choice of roles earlier, is the fact that he did Bill and Ted 1 and 2. He didn't have to return to that role in, 2019, 2020, whenever that came out. Yeah. Bill and Ted Face the Music, which I enjoyed, not as much as the first two, but I enjoyed it. But it's the fact that he didn't have to make that film, and he knew it wasn't going to be like a Matrix or anything huge. But he returned to a role that he clearly had a fondness for, you know, if anything, to, you know, benefit his colleague, old Alex Winter, yeah. And it's that thing. It's like, to me, that kind of sums him up, where he's just like, I don't care, I'm going to play a dumbass again and be like, whoa, you know, all that. And that's.
I think he's openly said in interviews that he likes to do films because he likes to do films. He's not necessarily doing it, you know, for the money or for roles that he, you know, he likes to do the films that he wants to do.
He's been in such independent films. There was a film a couple of years ago I remember seeing on Sky where it's these two young women and they turn up at his house. It's the young woman from the Bond film that...
Yeah, Anna Amis or...
Yeah,
whatever.
she's...
Yeah.
And they kind of seduce...
Knock, is it called or something?
I think it might be like that, but it's almost like a black comedy. It's like really scary but also very funny. But it's just like, why is Keanu in this film? Not in a bad way, but it just shows you that versatility of, I'll take any role, you know, kind of thing.
Well, if you like dial the clock back on Keanu, obviously he did Bill and Ted and he became a sort of household name to an extent. And straight after that, he went and did Bram Stoker's Dracula, where he had like one of the most horrific accents you could probably ever ask for in a film, playing a role that was so outside of his comfort zone. And then he did a Gus Van Sant film with River Phoenix, and I think it was called My Own Private Idaho, where he played again like a hustler, a gay hustler on the streets. And like, that is not necessarily Keanu role. After you've said like the Point Breaks, the Bill and Ted's, he tried to challenge himself as an actor. And I think realistically, maybe off the back of that, he realised that those kind of roles, that maybe he didn't have the range to do that, and he kind of fell back into a certain style of film where he felt a little bit more comfortable. And I know he's gone and done things that, like an action film is obviously quite different to, say, a comedy or a thriller and so on and so forth, but he quite often plays Keanu.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Kind of very low, kind of down here in his range. But I think, I was going to say, like, he's, you know, you brought up earlier the Devil's Advocate movie. He's fantastic in that. He's so good. he's a real kind of tortured soul, or a soul that is tortured throughout the movie. But again, like you say, he is kind of playing Keanu again. It is very much that low range, that voice, that very what would you say, almost reserved acting at times, but it's no less convincing.
Yeah, the one kind of film we've not seen him in is like a drama, really, you know, where like a pretty straight drama that I can think of. Like a lot of the films he's done are very varied.
Has he done like a romantic comedy?
Probably something like that, maybe.
I mean, he was in, I mean, if I remember rightly, he was in Parenthood, but he was just like a...
Yeah, but
that was really, really early.
Oh, yeah, I saw that in the cinema in Canada in August of 89.
But I imagine he probably can, and, you know, like many actors, Keanu.
Well, he did like a Walk in the Clouds, which was a bit of a sort of period, not quite a period drama, but something like a historical romance type film. And again, it wasn't necessarily, well, like the fact that you're both looking at me as though it's like, what the hell is that film?
I know,
would suggest it didn't really sink into the public consciousness.
I kind of, just one more comparison or one more thing. I feel like him and Brad Pitt are very similar in their film careers, in that they do blockbusters and then the most random independent shit that you're just like, okay. You know, Brad Pitt will be in like this film and you're like, Brad Pitt's, and then he'll be in, like, he'll have, you know, something really, like he did that cameo in Deadpool 2, like for 1 second, or he'll pop up in this movie or that movie, and they're very like, and you know, I'm guessing they're probably similar ages, maybe. I may be completely wrong now, but yeah, that's my little thing.
See, this is something I've just found out. He starred in a TV show from when was it from? 2016 to 2018, called Swedish Dicks, which I've never heard of before, but has like Peter Stormare, who's probably most famous from Fargo.
And Marvel films, I think.
Oh yeah, Marvel films, and he played a character in that, and also starring that was Tracy Lords, who
The
Tracy Lords. So it strikes me as the sort of thing that was a little bit out there, but again, it shows he's just kind of up for anything to an extent, and I think he's got to the point in his career now where he's comfortable with who he is, comfortable with the jobs he takes, and will just do whatever interests him. And like, let's be honest, he probably doesn't need the money, so it's and yeah,
I might write a film and just get him to be in and be like, I'd love to do your movie.
He strikes me as the sort of person that in sort of 10, 15 years' time, he'll be like Bill Murray, where there's just a private phone number that you can call up and he'll be like, oh, that sounds good, I'll do that, rather than conventional.
Or he'll just start doing really, and also like Murray, doing really super independent films, like crazy independent ones, by young directors. I'll do your movie.
One of the biggest roles he's had recently was in Cyberpunk, which is a very famous computer game. Like, I work in the computer games industry. It was made by the same people who made the Witcher games, Project Red, and everyone was excited that Keanu was associated with this game, and it was an absolute disaster. When they first released it, it was buggy as hell. It was released on PS4 and kind of the older Xbox version, and it just ran terribly, and there was a whole host of problems. And they even asked Keanu about it, and he was a bit like, well, I don't really play computer games. And again, it's that sort of thing where he wasn't that fussed. He didn't play the PR game, but he's forever going to be attached to that title. And you play as Keanu, where you have the choice of doing that. So yeah, it shows his sort of willingness to branch out and do things.
Well, the only reason I know about that is I remember seeing on YouTube the day it was announced, and he came out from like behind the curtain, and that reception is like, it's like Keanu's like, yeah, he's a bit like Harrison Ford in that kind of low kind of speaking voice.
I'm up. You like that, huh?
Nice ride.
Thanks.
Today we've just watched John Wick, the first one. I guess to start with, had anyone seen this film before? Nige?
You know what? And I say this very rarely on this podcast. I had not watched this film at any point prior to today.
So I had seen it, but I was quite drunk, and I know I've said this a few times on the podcast, and I really shouldn't watch films when I'm quite drunk, he says as he sips a whiskey. Yeah, I watched this. I couldn't actually remember it that well, but yeah, Etok, had you seen this film?
Funny question, Smith, and I think you know the answer. I went to the cinema and I saw John Wick 2, and then I saw John Wick 3 when that came out, but not 1, because, and this is no spoiler because we obviously will get into the plot, which is pretty simple. But I sat down in the cinema next to my mate, and he was like, "We're gonna go see John Wick 2." We sit down. I turned to him as the intro was rolling, and I said, "What happened in the first one?" And he just went, "They killed his dog. They stole his car. He had revenge." I was like, "Okay." That was literally all he said, because that's all you. I mean, in fairness, that is the plot. Let's be honest. Like, going into this, it is a very A to B to C to D, E, whatever plot. There's no subplot, actually. It is just all plot A.
I think the only thing to add is right at the beginning of the film, we find out his wife's died. And I think it's worth also pointing out that in Keanu Reeves' life, his wife died. And his... Obviously, River Phoenix, you mentioned earlier, River Phoenix died. So I feel like he's had quite a tough life.
Yeah, a lot of loss.
So you can see the kind of the script was also... I don't know if it was, meant for him, but it was definitely related. The guys who directed it, so director was Chad Stahelski. On IMDb, it also says David Leitch, but he's uncredited on IMDb, but he's credited, which makes no sense. And it's written by Derek Kolstad. And these guys apparently were stunt dudes on The Matrix, which makes quite a lot of sense when you watch the
double
film.
E's type things, and obviously there's a hell of a lot of stunts in those films. So, and as I mentioned earlier about the whole thing about he was so generous with all the stunt people that worked on The Matrix, Keanu, that obviously they built up a very close relationship. And when they decided to make these films, who was the person to go to?
How much?
Excuse me?
How much for the car?
She's not for sale.
You have good day, sir.
Yeah, he meets these kind of Russian dudes at a petrol station. They want to talk to him about his car. They want to sell the car. He doesn't want to give them the car. They go to his flat.
His flat.
His apartment, his luxury
His
boutique.
giant luxury house.
They knock him unconscious. They kill his really cute dog. Which is probably the most heartbreaking scene in the whole film.
Well, the good thing is, in that very short space of time, we're talking about, 5-10 minutes of that dog being introduced. And the dog is basically a gift from his departed wife. It was like something she arranged very prior to her passing. And so she writes a letter to him, or she wrote a letter to him, and so he reads the letter, and it's a very moving letter. And within the space of 5 minutes, they really establish that this dog and Keanu have this connection, and it's really beautifully done. And it is kind of, the death of the dog is really earned very quick. So you don't go like, oh, okay. It's just like, oh no, we were kind of like all gasping at the screen. I kind of knew it was coming, but still, it was just like, oh, that's really horrible. And then you see, if you look. The dog basically in its like dying breath had kind of crawled over, like it left a blood trail where it crawled over to Keanu to lay and to die by his side, because obviously it had that connection to him. It's like, oh, that's so poor doggy. And so right from that moment you're on Keanu's side, just like, can you just kill everybody?
Well, there's a good couple of minutes of the Keanu dog loving, where it's like, how do we best create this? And there's a scene where he puts him on the floor, and then there's a scene where he gets up and he's licking his face to wake him up, which apparently they did with bacon grease. So that classic way of rubbing Keanu's face with bacon grease. And then there's a really weird scene where the dog takes a poo, and there's the world's most perfect dog poo. And we were all kind of looking at it being like, why did they just put that in the film?
I lost everything. That dog was a final gift from my dying wife.
Jonathan, you got out once. You dip so much as a pinky back into this pond, you may find something reaching out to pull you back in.
It's personal.
Well, the gang they kind of speak to him, and they give him some abuse in Russian, and he replies in Russian. And straight away, that's like this character knows Russian. What does that mean? He's not just a
normal guy, and it basically turns out that he's a ex-hitman who's working for one of the gang's dad. Which is how it's kind of linked, and how this, as you said as we were watching it, it becomes like a killing the boss, like a computer game kind of film. All these layers of where to get to, climbing up the levels before you get to that boss. But it's a revenge film. It's a bit like Kill Bill, but in that respect, like something bad has happened, and it's a revenge film. It's very, as Etok said, a very, very basic premise.
Yeah, I mean, to explore Keanu's character in it, John Wick, he's formerly like from a band of assassins that operate out of New York, and that's where we were in the film, at least, unless that wasn't New York. Pretty confident it was. Reckon there's a few landmarks from Ghostbusters, but yeah, it's this group of assassins, and they've got all these kind of rules and stuff, and they operate from this hotel called the Continental, and they present it as like a hotel, but really it's where all the assassins gather, and they're not allowed to carry out business on the grounds of this hotel.
I have you for 2 nights?
Depending on business, it may be more.
Of course, sir.
So when the old place get a facelift?
Around 4 years ago. But I assure you, sir, she really hasn't changed much.
Same owner.
Same owner.
And there's like, you go through the kitchen, and there's a door, so I was going to say a secret door, but we see the door, and you go through, and that's where there's like this underground club of assassins and where people hang out, and where one of our favourite British actors...
He's selling antiques.
Not selling antiques, Nige, that was another show he did. Ian Lovejoy... Ian Lovejoy McShane, not Ian McJoy. So yeah, Ian.
So this is one of the first. So something that will become a common theme in this film is like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that girl. It's, oh my goodness, it's them. It's them. And before having watched John Wick, I heard that it was kind of a little bit of a surprise hit. It was just a fairly generic idea, as Smith said, a revenge film. But then there's this, oh my God, everyone's in it kind of situation, which actually really took me by surprise. And I would say good old Lovejoy is well up there. But you mentioned earlier that there's not really a subplot. I would disagree and just say there's one small subplot. Sorry, Etok mentioned.
You're going to credit me.
Well, our listeners didn't see anything. Just because I looked at him, they didn't see that I was looking at him. So we got away with that. But
the power of radio.
William Dafoe, a.k.a. the Green Goblin, a.k.a. Jesus, a.k.a... It's William Dafoe, for goodness sake.
It's Willie
He's
Dafoe.
like an old friend of John Wick's, and he shows up at his wife's funeral, and you're thinking, oh, what's going on here? How do these two know each other? And there's this kind of relationship there, which, as the film progresses, there's this undercurrent of Dafoe looking out for him. And I was extremely surprised to see someone of William Dafoe's sort of credentials and just being in this film. So it was, and as I said, Lovejoy, Dafoe, John Leguizamo shows up quite early on as well.
The lash you're on about?
There's an actress who I absolutely love from a TV show called Friday Night Lights, which if you've not had an opportunity to see,
I have not either.
Very, very, very much suggest you check it out. And her name is Adrienne Palicki, and she plays Palecki, perhaps. She plays Miss Perkins, another assassin.
She's the daughter of someone. I feel like there's a Palecki who's
she grows into the film as well, doesn't she? She's not really in it a lot, but she has quite a big role, I would say, in the later stages, which maybe we'll get to.
She kind of lights up the screen, I would say. She's not really done that much in terms of things you'd know. She was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a bit, but other than that, she's like a G.I. Joe film. But she has this kind of personality and this kind of impact on the screen.
Hey, John. I thought I'd let myself in.
But you almost think when she first comes onto the screen, it's like, oh, here's the generic like love interest. He's getting over his ex. Spoiler, doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. That's really true, actually. That is the first thing. And even in the film, he meets a couple of women, actually only 2 women, her and the kind of barmaid that he knows before. And you think, oh, he's probably going to hook up with one of them. And it's not about that at all. Like, he's not interested in love or any relationship whatsoever. All he's interested in is revenging, the people who stole his car and killed his dog. What did I say?
You said revenging. You can do it again.
Cool. Tomato.
Let's cut the whole thing off. But there's also a bit where he has his wife's bracelet, and then next to it he puts his dog's like collar, and it's like, this is my table of revenge.
The revenge table.
We spoke about it a little bit as we were watching it, and it's very, at times, like you spoke about the music a lot, like 90s, like very kind of like cheesy, like rocky kind of. There was Marilyn Manson playing. There was. Yeah, it was almost like, at times, is it taking the piss out of itself or is it not? And it was quite hard to distinguish
Someone's had
that
some
line.
whiskey.
Yeah. But also, not only that, like the whole style of the film. Like there are a lot of quotes, like
the trailer moment where the dad, the big Russian baddie,
big Russian dad,
and basically he's telling his son that John Wick is coming to revenge him. Avenge. Okay. And I love. We were all kind of sitting there laughing because it became like, oh, this is. None of us have seen the trailer. I guarantee we look at the trailer and it's this speech where it's like, he will come for you. He will cut off your bollocks. That kind of thing. Where it's just and it's intersect with
maybe
shots
I'll cut
of
the trailer in here.
And cue the trailer.
Not what you did, son. It's who you did it to.
Nobody?
That nobody is John Wick.
He's using the hammer to break through this concrete in the basement of his flat.
It's one bed.
It's one bed apartment. His giant apartment. And he's smashing through the floor to get all his basically guns and ammo and coins, which they use at the Continental
his gold
hotel.
coins, of course.
His gold coins. So he can go on so many rides at theme parks.
Yeah.
But it's wonderfully cheesy in that sense. And you do wonder. You just said it there, Smith. Like you wonder if the choice of music was intentional. I know that sounds really stupid to say, but the choice of like very 90s sounding music. Because you both picked it up, and I was like, oh, maybe. And then towards the end of the movie, I was just like, this sounds like something you'd genuinely hear in the movie Snatch. And then what was your...
It was the credits. So when the sort of credits rolled, it sounded just like the music from... And apologies to some of our younger listeners, but some of your older ones may remember before like a DVD or a video, there was like, you wouldn't steal a car. And then it's like... So don't steal a sort of DVD, don't piracy, all that kind of stuff. And the music that hopefully Smith can find this music and cut this in here because it'd be fantastic. But there is a very well-known kind of trailer warning advert, and it was just like, this is the same music.
Well, and I think also the fact that these guys worked on The Matrix, like a lot of the
Yes!
kind of music
that soundtrack
and feeling of that. And I mean, obviously the stunts and the, you know, that kind of action side is very obviously Matrix influenced. But even like that and Equilibrium, like two very kind of similar kind of style.
I saw that at the cinema.
Christian
Equilibrium.
Bale, yeah.
Who was in that? Christian Bale
And Sean Bean.
Sean, give blood.
Jimmy Muir.
I saw that at
again,
cinema.
another film that's very kind of Matrix.
Is that the one where they do...
What, When Saturday Comes?
Is that the one where they use a style of like fighting called gun kata, and whenever they fire
Very
a bullet,
fast.
there's like an X. Like, it's,
ridiculous cuts, like hyper energy, that kind of film.
Quite a nice idea, that film, because it's about not kind of showing emotion, isn't it? Like the kind of dystopian future, of
Which
not
Keanu
showing-
Reeves has been known for throughout his entire career. Which is
so back to Keanu.
Anyway, sorry, Equilibrium.
But going back to so I kind of like let's go kind of so he does the thing, and they basically, you know, now he's on the big Russian baddie knows that John Wick's coming to kill his son, so he sends his band of assassins to John Wick's flat.
His nameless balaclava assassins. It's basically the same stuntman doing it over and over again.
But John Wick, and that's the first time we see him in action. And I mean, it's all beautifully shot and choreographed. I think this film, in terms of action, you're not confused about who's doing what, and it's the smoothness of which John Wick takes out his opponents with like gun, you know, shots to the head, like boof, boof, like turns around the corner, boof. It's like, has he got some like sixth sense or something? But obviously he's a superbly trained assassin.
You working again?
No, just sorting some stuff out.
Task your crew.
How many?
As many as you have.
Well, they call him the boogeyman,
Oh,
but
the
not the
boogeyman,
boogeyman, the killer of boogeymans. And when they do this as well, because every now and again the Russian mafia boss and his various goons, they speak Russian and do it in a really weird way where the subtitles come up in strange fonts.
Kind of stylized kind of graphics.
But again, very 90s.
Definitely very nice. Like the boogeyman comes up in like this almost like flashing yellow, what did you call it, like Serial Geek?
Serial Geek is a very popular magazine written by James Douglas Eatock.
But it was like, you kept pointing out, it's like an italicized blocky font, and it was just bright yellow or orange, and it kind of stood out from the rest of the text. It's just like, that's a very interesting choice, because the other subtitles throughout the film, when it was just Russian, would often just come up
generic.
But they decided for certain speeches to really punctuate it. Punctuate it? That's the word.
I think that works.
That's a word. I've heard that before. And they use that to, like you say, when they're talking about the boogeyman and stuff, and it kind of pops up, and it just feels a little bit, very like Gone in 60 Seconds or something.
Yes, again, which is a quintessential 90s film.
Movie,
or it might be early 90s. Apologies
I think
if
it
it
was
is.
the year 2000.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. We're going back to sort of Swordfish again, in the sense of
that
that kind of film where
John Travolta with white hair.
But it was just a little bit jarring for me. I was very surprised to see it. And I wondered if at one point all the things that were kind of made a bit more exaggerated, like the boogeyman, would eventually make this sort of hidden quote within the film of like, the boogeyman is coming to get you. But no, they were just doing it occasionally.
No, you're right. They didn't. That would have been a nice payoff, actually.
They didn't really come back to that, did they? And also, you mentioned a little bit ago the hotel, and I think it's worth talking a little bit more about that, because that is... I haven't seen 2 and 3, but it sounds like, that is almost a character in itself, this kind of assassin's hotel that they go to. And it's so brilliantly kind of designed, and the look at we joked about Kirsty and Phil being there, and the interior design of it is all very...
You might need to explain that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know they were.
Kirsty and Phil were a British kind of... Oh, my God, it's not even worth explaining. Yeah, it's a interior design show in the UK.
But just going back to the hotel very quickly before you carry on, there's also a couple of actors that show up in that scene as well. A couple of people from The Wire, which is one of the sort of greatest sort of TV shows in American history, and they just suddenly, again, it's like, oh, it's that guy from The Wire. Yeah, and it's just, again, it's kind of, maybe it adds a little bit of credential to the film, to the hotel, to the setting, whatever it is, but yeah, I was very excited at that point. So again, maybe that hotel, they're trying to create this aura or certain type of respect for it by throwing some brilliant actors at it.
People keep asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
There's little nods. I mean, I might be wrong, but there's little nods in this film to other films. Like I mentioned, when they kind of go into this big kind of clubby area where they're basically having a shootout in a club, and it's actually the guns are timed to the music beat. It's like bang bang, and to me it reminded me of Blade with Wesley Snipes, just because of the kind of the contrast of this, people dancing and having fun and the kind of darkness of it, but then with the hotel you've got this kind of very red, very kind of almost stylish kind of contrast with these people that are bad people, really, which is...
You've reminded me, in the... this won't be a spoiler. So the hotel was featured in the second movie. Right. But one of the things you've just reminded me there about the style, about the people, and it's exemplified by the barmaid. In the second film, you see a lot of characters with tattoos and stuff, beautifully done, but almost like 1950s. Rockabilly, that kind of thing, where you've got tattoos in that style. And characters like that show up in the second film, and a lot of that the plot of the second movie is really fucking good. And but yeah, it's like you say, the contrast of that to this kind of very old timey Art Deco style hotel and this kind of classy red underground kind of club. It's very unique, and like you say, it's a character in itself. But I love, and it's again very very. Explored in the second film, the rules of the hotel about you cannot conduct business, and by business they mean if you see someone there you've got to kill, you can't do it, which is why Miss Perkins was her name, is why she breaks the rules, and there's a great payoff at the end of that, which we will probably get to.
But yeah, you kind of mentioned the tattoos as well. Like Keanu's character has a big tattoo across his back. It's very famous in kind of like Russian gangsters, like this whole tattoo vibe as well. But yeah, Smith was sort of talking about the hotel and everything, and we mentioned the scene in the club where he's sort of fighting his way through, shooting all these people. And there's a ridiculous scene about halfway through where he goes into a room and all the bad guys have got like jackets on and red shirts. And it's almost like a duck hunt game where it's like, shoot everyone with a red shirt. And I read about it afterwards, and the director basically said, we wanted it to be like a homage to Star Trek where the red shirts always die. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. And at the time we were all like, oh yeah, just anyone in a red shirt. Oh, if you just happen to wear a red shirt to the club that night, unlucky. And it was it was ridiculous.
Well, obviously his dad in the film, the big boss, the dad, wears a red shirt, doesn't he, for most of the film? And,
I didn't even clock that.
And the fact that all the kind of the minions are like almost following him.
Expendables.
Yeah. And him, John Wick, he's a bit like a superhero in this film. You know, he is almost invincible. Like he gets shot, he's got a vest on, but he gets shot and then he gets injured.
But he only gets shot by like what did we call it? Like the middle tier bosses, like on the way through the computer games. Like as you're going through the levels, the generic people can't hurt you. But if you're like, oh, you've got a couple of lines, or oh, he's just stylish enough to be important, they're the only ones that could even cause any damage at all.
Yeah, he fights that guy in the club, and the guy beats him, technically, throws him over the balcony.
Oh, yeah, so really, brilliantly done sort of stunt where he falls. And Keanu said as well that he did 90% of the stunts in the film. Wow. And there's a lot of stunts in that film.
The action in this film is, I mean, because obviously, you know, one, he did a lot of stunt work for The Matrix and a lot of like martial arts training and that. So that obviously came into use. Obviously, we're talking 14, 15 years after The Matrix, at least the first one. But obviously the stunt guys making this film that worked with him before probably knew his limitations, what he was good at. You know, he's not very good at kicking, but he's great with the upper body stuff. So, I thought the fight sequences in this film were like rather good.
I mean, that stands out for me, from anything else. You know, the action in this film.
I think it's unapologetic. I think they go for that. They're not trying to tell. They give you like the brief story at the beginning, the very tragic tale, and then we get the death of his wife, death of his dog, his car gets stolen, and then it's just, do you know what?
She never gets back as well.
No.
He just gets some nice
Ford
cars on his way
Mustang
through.
69 Fastback. It's the same, like obviously Mustang from Bullet, but yeah, he just basically goes on this like massive fight, and it's not to jump ahead too much. The only issue I had was I just thought every time the film had got to the point of, oh, this must be the final boss. Like, oh, he's killed the son. Oh, no, now he's got to kill this person. And it's like, now he's got to find the body of Willie Dafoe. And it felt like, oh, we're finished. Oh, no, we're not finished. It's like Lord of the Rings all over again. It's like, here's 402 endings.
Yeah. Well, hence why there's now, 4 John Wick films and a 5th one coming. So
I've seen 3.
Yeah, I think there's a 4th one coming out soon.
Oh, well, I think there's a 5th after that as well. So.
Wow, there you go.
But they obviously, you know, they're doing the journey. There's no doubt he's an action hero, like action hero, as they used to call him in the 80s.
It was a shock. Like, it was released, as I said it sort of earlier, it was one of those films where it was almost just to buy the numbers, oh, it will do okay, cost I think like 20 mil, but then made like 4 times what they paid to make it. So they were shocked by that. There's like an element of it being off the back of films like Taken, where the sort of slightly older action star sort of bringing in that kind of audience, the box office, and they've kind of, there's a few Taken films as well. So
it is crazy why it works though, like, because, you know, I sat there and watched it and I enjoyed it. I don't think it's the greatest film ever made, but it's amazing how it did catch the box office. Like, I don't know what the numbers are, Nige, if you don't mind. But it clearly, you know, for it to produce, well, Nige's just saying like 2, 3, 4, and possibly 5, you know, films.
20 to 30 million to make, 86 million made.
That's good. In the days of Marvel movies, which this came out in 2014, that they're kind of, you know, you've got, I guess, Captain America films coming out, Spider-Man films coming out, all this stuff. To do that turnover at the box office is really fucking good. And but yeah, if you wrote this on paper, I don't think
it would be very quick to write.
It would be really quick. But also, you know, if you haven't got Keanu Reeves in this film would probably not be very successful.
Absolutely.
You talking about that, like, and
Aaron Paul is John Wick.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you saying about like the car from Bullet. When the sort of director and writer sort of put this together, they couldn't envisage any of like modern Hollywood being in this film. They were all like, oh, it should be Steve McQueen. It should be like a classic Hollywood star. But obviously they're not available, so they went with Keanu, and well, the rest is history. So
it's one of those films you kind of we could attach this statement to any review. I'm someone that loves the Marvel movies, but it is so refreshing these days when you get a film that isn't a superhero movie, and even if it's an action movie or whatever, it's just like, oh, I really enjoyed that, and it wasn't this film, it wasn't a Marvel film or whatever. So yeah, I'm glad to see that this film has found an audience and continues to find one. Like I say, I remember really, really enjoying the second one. Third one was a lot of fun, but the second one was to the point where we've seen this, I'm probably going to watch the second one in the next few days again.
Like, obviously with everything going on right now, it sounds kind of weird to say, but it seems very, the fact they've gone for like a Russians as baddies is very 80s 90s kind of baddies, like we've seen in many films before. And it's obviously a coincidence at the moment we're reviewing this film as obviously the kind of Russian-Ukraine conflict is going on, but it felt a bit uncomfortable watching that at times, knowing about it. But it's once again we're going back to Rocky IV and painting these guys as the baddies.
Oh, Russians make great baddies though.
But yeah,
see, this is a dial back to, was it Red Heat, one of our very earliest sort of film
wasn't that like our first film?
I believe so. So for the first 20 minutes
we're fluent in Russian, so we didn't need subtitles.
Exactly.
Just Arnie and Snow, that's all we needed.
So I guess, yeah, scene-wise, obviously, he pretty much kills everyone. Yeah. It gets to the end of the film.
77 kills.
Wow.
Well, there you go.
Someone did a count. That's brilliant. Nige was sitting there counting with it. He had a little watch.
And the final one, the 77th one, is obviously going to be, so spoiler alert coming up, is the dad. But yeah, the fight against the Russian dad, I have no idea what his name is. It's like Vigrov or something.
I think it's Vigo, like Vigo the Carpathian from Ghostbusters.
Vigo! It's a double G, Vigo, yes.
Vigo. And it's funny because it starts off and it's very dark and like Matrix-y once again, and then all of a sudden it starts raining and the thunder comes down. It's all very cinematic. I mean, it looks brilliant, but it's very, very cliche and kind of like pushing that kind of action thing.
Just you and me, John. You and me.
Well, basically that scene as well. So for me, it was a little bit anticlimactic, and I sort of read afterwards that the original cut of the film was a lot longer, and most of what was cut was that final fight scene between John Wick and Vigo, the main bad guy. And the reason why they cut it down was they were like, well, to be honest, Vigo is no match for John Wick.
Yeah, that was the thing. That's the problem I had.
Yeah, you've pimped him out as this like killing machine, and we kind of discussed whilst we were watching it. One of our previous podcasts, which we hope you listened to, is Rambo First Blood, and how Colonel Troutman comes in. He's like, Rambo's a killing machine. You're going to need a lot of body bags, etc. Vigo does this to his son, to basically anyone who wants to listen to him about John Wick, and then when he comes to him face to face at the end, they're trying to pitch him as equals, but they're never going to be equals.
Well, especially the other problem is we haven't seen Vigo in the film as a competent fighter. No. We've seen him punch people and like punch his son and punch William Dafoe's character.
People who are extremely vulnerable and have no way of fighting back.
But we don't see him like, engage in any kind of combat to the point where when we see him at the end, it's like, oh, this is going to be a fair fight. I just sat there thinking, like you said, the best word, anticlimactic. It was just like, this is the final fight. This feels really weird. Although I really hoped the film would end with that final shot of him walking away, because I did really enjoy that shot where the Vigo dies and John Wick is walking towards the camera slowly. And you get that sense. I thought it was a really good shot. I wrote it down. I just wrote last shot, but I wrote last in quotation marks because there was a few more scenes afterwards. But it felt like a really good way they should have ended the film, because it's just him walking towards the camera, and you kind of get that sense. It's like written on his face. That's why Keanu's a great actor. That he can never escape this life. I know it sounds melodramatic, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it did look like he's walking away so despondent that he's been dragged back into that he didn't want to do any of this, and it's like, here I am again killing. And I just got that impression from the end. It was just like he wasn't, this is over, I'm happy and I'm going to do some, play some golf. It was just, I've just killed 77 people. And now I'm going to go, and now I'm suffering all this blood loss, but now I'm going to go and grab a random dog that was, as Nige said, probably promised to a family.
But then he probably at that stage knew he'd signed on for another 4 or 5 films. So
I think that is the thing with this film. He is never really tested. He is
in 2 and 3, definitely.
Oh, okay. To me, I just felt like I wasn't worried that he was ever going to get hurt. He wasn't even in a fight, really. Like, there was one bit where he got shot kind of almost accidentally. But other than that, he was just too strong. It was almost like the problem with Superman being, like, almost powerful. And that's what John Wick kind of is, even though all he really is in this film is someone getting revenge after, a dog and like we've said, like, the story's very simple. And I think that is probably, for me, one of the issues with the film. The layers at the beginning are good. I really like the kind of setup, the first 15 minutes. I was like, this is really good. It was a really good start. But then it's basically an hour and 15 minutes of the same.
It glorifies violence to an insane degree.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, see, this is it. I would potentially disagree. Like, I grew up on a lot of 80s films where there was that kind of like Arnie blowing people up, that kind of thing. But the way this is almost so clinical in the fact everything ends with like a headshot.
Yeah, I see your point.
It is just quite brutal. And I think, like Smith said, he's almost sort of invincible. It's only when he comes up against those kind of like
mid-level boss.
Yeah. So like Miss Perkins, I would say, is one of those. The guy who sort of
she's probably his biggest test in the whole film.
And she was originally written as a man as well, but obviously they sort of changed the dynamic slightly, which gave it a little bit extra. And William Dafoe bails him out on a couple of occasions with his sniper rifle. But yeah, like you say, it never seems like there's any real peril in anything John Wick does.
The other thing is, like, they miss a trick. Like, with his vulnerability and his wife dying and stuff like that, we never really come back to that. We never see that raw emotion that we get from Stallone at the end of Rambo. We
get it in the chair scene when he's being captured by Vigo, and he goes, everybody keeps asking me why I came back, and like he just kind of loses his shit. And you're like, okay, that's the one scene in the film where he really, aside from
I just wanted more of that. I think
no, I agree, but I think if you got more of that, you get less of the killing machine, the perfect killing machine, because he has to put on that kind of mask, as it were, of like, now I'm a killing machine. And in that moment with Vigo, it's just like, oh, I can actually be honest, because I guess he feels that he's about to die anyway. So it's just like, well, I'm gonna, and then they try and suffocate him. And then Willie Dafoe to the rescue. So looking at this film, I think if I'd seen this at the cinema and my friend would say, do you want to go and see the sequel? I'd probably be like, nah, I think I'm okay. By seeing the sequel, I never went back and watched the first until now, but I sort of like, I could have happily missed this movie. And I think, like I said, my friends, when we sat down in the cinema and he turned to me and I said, what happened in the first one? He gave me that simple plot, this happened, that happened, this happened. I was like, that it? He's like, yeah. So, okay, well, now I can enjoy the second one. So this film, by it's going to sound really weird, by saying that, it means that the first film really doesn't matter in the story of John Wick. Maybe the first few minutes do, and then like an abridged version of, he lost his wife, lost his dog, lost his car, got revenge, and now the story of John Wick begins. And so like the second one, like I say, explores more of the code of the assassin and stuff. And I'll give it another watch at some point.
So I guess that leads into your review.
Yeah,
rating.
Yeah, what will be your rating out of 10 then?
Oh,
John Wick 1. This is.
I'm gonna give it. I think I'm gonna give it a 5.
Oh wow.
I think that's really middle of the road. I think technically it's middle. I think it's not an original film. It's a very simple film. I like Keanu in it. I think the film is its pace is kind of is what it is. It's it's not a brilliant film by any means, but I think the cinematography, there's a weird charm to this movie, and I can't quite pinpoint it. The dog. It's the dog, isn't it? It's the dog. It's the dog. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with a 5. I think that's fair, because I know from what I remember the second film, I would give that much higher. So yeah.
Nige, what did you think?
So for me, I kind of mentioned the sort of glorification of violence. Maybe I'm getting too old for these types of films. I think the music really didn't sit particularly well with me. The best thing about this film for me was, as we kind of touched upon earlier, the fact random actors kept popping up, and it's like, oh, it's her, it's him. That was my favourite bit. I sort of was a bit giddy at certain points when certain people showed up. So even despite all that, like Etok said, the pacing, there is no pacing. It's just like shoot. And you know what? I actually got quite bored. It's rare for me to be bored during an action film, but it was the kind of film where I was like, I knew how long the running time was, and I was still a bit like, God, this is going on for a bit long. I just did not really enjoy it very much at all. So for me, I would only give it a 4.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we're going down.
Interesting.
Smith, 10. Wait, what?
Best film ever.
I really did enjoy the first 10-15 minutes of this film. I really enjoyed... I enjoyed the layers, and I enjoyed the fact his wife died, and I
easy, Smith.
I enjoyed the fact that there was a plight to this character. It's very obvious. However, then it just became a generic film. The one thing I would say is, if you guys watched this in the 80s or 90s, you probably would have liked it.
I definitely agree.
The fact that this is made now doesn't necessarily mean it, it should be good because it's looking back in nostalgic ways, which is basically what this film has tried to do. I think it's got some amazing action. I think Keanu Reeves is very good in it, and like I said, if it wasn't him in this film, I probably would have turned it off, because he is probably the biggest draw in this film. The music is slightly odd at times. I think at times it works, it's very Matrix. It's very like that kind of hard rock, like heavy metal, yeah. And that's good. But when you've had 8-9 tracks and you're listening to a music video, it felt like a music video at times, this film. I enjoyed the kind of the bit parts of people, but for me that wasn't enough either. I think a 5 and a 4 was slightly lower than what I was going to say. I was going to give it a 6. I thought it was a watchable film. I wouldn't say I got bored, but I wouldn't say I'd watch it again. I think maybe, weirdly, I still want to watch the second one just out of interest.
See, for me, this film has put me off watching any others, but Etok talking about the second one has got me a little bit intrigued.
I wanted more from him, I wanted more, like I said earlier, I wanted more from John Wick. And I just felt that, like we talked about, not on the podcast, like Cobra Kai, the layers in that are so good, but probably with the same amount of action and cheese that this would have, but without those layers, Cobra Kai would be nothing.
How good's your laundry?
No one's that good.
I thought not.
Well, there you go. Guys, what do you think of John Wick? Do you agree with us? We're all on the same page today. We're not always on the same page. Get in touch. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Let us know what you thought about John.